He then tells the three of us, plus a friend who was along for the ride, to get down on our knees. What is happening, roadies? Welcome back. Yet another Story Time Friday here at Roadie Free Radio. It is the first official week of spring, and man, I am super excited. I'm crazy. I'm crazy for spring. I'm psyched that winter is kind of fading off into the sunset, but you never know, man. Here in the New England Northeast, we have certainly had our fair share of April storms. So I'm not totally celebrating just yet, but you know, what are you going to do? It's a good time. It's a good time. Anyway, thank you so much for swinging by, having a listen, having a watch to yet another Storytime Friday here of Hell on Wheels, a Tour Stories compilation by Greg Jacobs. I thank you so much, and I hope you guys are doing well. It has been great to have you along for this journey. We've only got about 9 more stories. That means about 9 weeks left of these awesome stories from this sort of do-it-yourself world of touring here with some of these bands, and I really thank you, and I appreciate you coming along for the ride. I also want to give a shout out to Greg Jacobs, as I always do, the author of this book. As you guys know, if you've been following along, we've got a new edition of this book coming out sometime this summer, I believe, perhaps late summer, early fall now. The University of Hell Press is doing an all-new version, new stories. Greg is super excited, and as I've mentioned, we're going to get Greg on the show when this thing is all done so we can talk to him and interview him about the book and whatnot, and what's going to be coming out in the new book that makes it different. So, as always, if you want to help support the show and support Greg, you can do so by picking up this version of the book right now by using the Amazon link in the description, or if you can find a used version, or you can wait till this summer, end of summer, when the new book comes out and go ahead and pick that one up. Whatever you like. I think you should get both. It'd make a nice display on the old library bookcase to have both of these up there. So anyway, that's the first thing. Second thing is, as always, a big shout out to my sponsor, One of One Production, the podcast solutions company. And if you've been paying attention, then you've definitely heard about the Roadie Free Radio podcast bundle that I did with the folks over at One of One Production. It includes a Roswell Audio Mini K87 microphone, a Focusrite 2i2 Scarlett 3rd edition, or the Solo, a hard shell carrying case, cables, whatever you need to get yourself started or to take your show up to the next level. So check that out. Use the code roadiefreeradio when you check out. That lets them know who sent you, and it helps keep the lights on here at Roadie Free Radio. So with all that out of the way, our band story today is about a band called Popdefect. Popdefect. Here we go. Oh, a little tidbit for you, by the way. A lot of times I don't read the stories prior to reading them for you. So for me, they start to unfold organically as I do the reading, and there could be some surprises. Who knows? Here we go. Popdefect. Hell on wheels, baby. We were driving up from North Los Angeles. I guess it was to San Francisco. No, actually, it was all the way up to Seattle. We pull out of a gas station at about 2 o'clock in the morning, somewhere in the middle of the San Joaquin Valley, and this cop pulls us over. I couldn't think of any reason why we had been stopped, but we pulled over. All of a sudden, the police officer see what I mean? I get tripped up. All of a sudden, the police officer tells everyone to put their hands outside the windows and get out of the driver's side of the car. He then tells the three of us, plus a friend who's along for the trip, to get down on our knees. The cops had their guns drawn and asked us if there was anyone being held against his will. We all said, yeah, none of us want to be here at this point in time. So they take Al, the guitar player, over to search the van, and the cop has his gun on him the whole time. The other cop has still got his gun drawn as well, holding it on the rest of us. Of course, we have an old van and the locks don't work, so Al has to reach inside the van in a weird way to unlock it. As he's doing this, Al is explaining to the officer exactly what he is doing, and he can hear the officer pull the hammer back on the gun. They finally searched the van, taking care of that sort of business, and then explained why they had pulled us over. Apparently, a trucker had radioed in that he had seen someone in the van frantically pointing a hand at the word help, which I had painted on the van on a hot summer day in Dallas a few months earlier. The trucker imagined that he'd seen someone pointing at this sign and called it in. So the police had been after us. We eventually get back on the road and we're driving away, and in no more than 5 minutes we catch up to these 2 tractor-trailer trucks. And these 2 semis block the road. They take up both lanes. Then all of a sudden they start slowing down. 50, 40, 30, 20 miles an hour. We start thinking, oh great, vigilantes. They think the cops are fucked and they're going to pull us out and start shooting or something. We finally got enough room to get by and got away. But it was more than a pretty eerie feeling there for a couple of miles. That was 1987. Another time, we had been on tour for about 2 months. We came back to LA and played the Southland for a couple of weeks, and we were about to go out again for a couple of months. We were still booking our own tours at this point, and Al had somehow hooked up with this guy from Pensacola, Florida, who was a blind wrestler. He mainly handled wrestling events, but he also did rock shows. He was going to set up the first leg of the tour. I think it was 5 dates between New Orleans and Pensacola. We didn't have anything before New Orleans. We just drove straight from LA to New Orleans. In the meantime, this promoter, wrestler guy, had called us, obviously unaware that it took 48 hours to drive from LA to New Orleans, and said that the show was canceled. So we finally get a hold of him while in New Orleans. He had been out on tour doing the wrestling thing. He says, yeah, the show in New Orleans was canceled, but come to Pensacola. I've got something for you there. So we got drunk in New Orleans that night and slept in the van and drove out to Pensacola the next day. We get there, show up at the club, and they had never heard of us. I mean, we're saying, what the fuck? We finally get a hold of the promoter and he says, sorry, it fell through. But go back to New Orleans. I got something out there at Tulane, the college. We gave a hesitant okay and went back out to New Orleans. Once again, there's no show. He again says to go back to Pensacola. By this time, we've given up on the blind wrestler, but we returned to Pensacola anyway. We didn't have anywhere else to go. We never even met the blind wrestler man. That was an evil beginning to the second leg of our tour. Don't ever book a tour with a blind wrestler. That was 1988. Once, we were coming back from Chicago, going to Seattle by way of Minnesota. It was extremely cold out. Nick, a friend, Paul, and I were playing cards in the back of the van drinking whiskey. Al was driving when it started to drizzle just a little bit. 2 minutes later, the van starts to slide back and forth. So I asked Al if, in fact, that was the case. As soon as he finished, yeah, I think it might be, we start doing 360s at 60 miles an hour, right down the middle of the freeway. It was really incredible because nobody was panicking. There was no screaming. We sat there looking at each other, cards still in hand, thinking, this is interesting. Just before we slid off the road, Al delivers a coy, I'm sorry. Fortunately, the meridian between the freeway was relatively level, so we slid to a circling halt. No one was hurt, but all the cards had been crushed in our fists. There was no damage to the van until I put my hand through the tail light trying to push it back onto the freeway. We pulled off at the next exit and decided to splurge and stay in a hotel. Only the second time we had ever done that. That was 1990. Popdefect, getting into it, man, putting the miles on as most of these bands do, as most of any bands do that really cut their teeth out there. Listen, guys, thank you again so much. Stay tuned to this channel. I've got some amazing interviews coming up that I've been booking. If you have not subscribed to the podcast itself, please do so. There's a link in the description below. Don't forget to like this video if you did. Subscribe to the channel. Leave me a comment. Leave me a short, brief story of one of your band stories. If you've got one, I'd love to hear from it. Or if you're a crew member, go ahead and leave me a crazy story about a time you were along with a band that got into it. And do not forget, if you want to help a roadie or crew member in need, you can do so by picking up some merch over at the Roadie Free Radio store. We've got everything from keychains, buttons, stickers, all that good stuff, and a portion of those proceeds will go to musiccares.org or roadiecare.com to help out a crew member in need. I'm super psyched to see shows opening back up, and I hope you guys are too. Be safe, be healthy, be strong out there, and I'll see you down the road.